Have you ever wondered exactly how hackers hack? Do you find words like firewalls, encryption, biometrics, malware a little bit confusing? Have you been looking for a course that teaches you the very basics of information and cybersecurity in a fun, relaxed manner? Well, if you answered yes to any one of these questions, you're in the right place. Hi, my name is Alex and I want to welcome you to this course, The Beginner's Guide to Information and Cybersecurity. Now, this is meant to be an introductory course for anyone who is interested in becoming a cybersecurity professional or an information security professional. It is also ideal for students who just want to have a well-rounded knowledge about the world of information and cybersecurity. So what exactly are you going to learn in this course? Well, we'll take a look at the terminologies used in the world of information security. We'll explore concepts like computer protocols and even the TCP/IP protocol. You will then learn about the methodology behind hacking, how hackers actually hack and how they think and how they operate. We will also take a look at the different ways our cyber criminals attack systems and computer networks. We'll also explore the different ways how cybersecurity professionals fight back, how they attempt to protect data and networks from cyber attacks. We'll also cover a wide range of topics related to the world of information security, such as information security at the workplace and even cyber warfare. By the end of this course, you will have gained a lot of knowledge and insights that will better help you understand the world of information security and help to jumpstart your career either as an information security professional or as a cybersecurity professional. Now, who am I to teach this course? Well, I have a career both as a cybersecurity professional and as a web developer that has spanned more than 10 years. I have been involved in different security projects for different companies over this period of time, and I also do have a master's degree in cybersecurity, and I've also been teaching online for about 2 years now, so I definitely have the necessary experience and qualifications to teach this course. So I hope you sign up for the course today, and I'll see you on the inside. Bye-bye. So let's take a look at the different ways how hackers and cyber criminals attack systems and networks. Now, obviously, I'm not going to cover every single way, as there are hundreds of different ways how attacks are carried out, but what we're going to cover in this section would be the major ones that happen very regularly, the major ways how attackers and cyber criminals hack into systems and networks. So you may have heard of a few of them before, like the DOS attack, the man-in-the-middle attack, and some other kinds of attacks like that. So we're going to take a look at them one by one, and of course, I will see you in the beginning of the very next section. Cheers. All right, so let's take a look at one of the oldest forms of attack and a very, very popular one, which is the brute force attack. So what exactly is the brute force attack? Well, this is considered to be a trial and error attack against passwords, maybe even PIN numbers, encrypted data, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason why it is a trial and error attack is because it checks all possible key combinations. So you have the hacker who tries every possible combination of a letter, a figure, a symbol, all in an attempt to get the right combination for the password. Now, automated software is typically used to generate a very large number of consecutive guesses. So it's not going to be the hacker who types in manually every single combination. You'll have software that can actually do that for them. Now, it is considered to be infallible, but time-consuming. Infallible because eventually the hacker would get the password if he keeps on trying every possible combination. But guess what? It can take years to get the right combination for certain kinds of password, because such an attack depends heavily on the key length. So the longer a password is in length, then the more time it is going to take for a hacker to crack that password. Try to think of the brute force attack in the same way as a burglar trying to break into a safe. Now he knows that there is a combination that needs to be entered for the safe to open, so he begins to try every possible combination. So the more characters that a code or password will have, then the longer it's going to take for the password to be cracked. Now let's take a look at an example. All right, let's imagine that a password had just two characters in length. Now this would only take 3,844 guesses. Why? Well, let's take a look at this. Well, imagine the very first character. You can either go with a lowercase letter, an uppercase letter, or with a number. All right, let's just imagine that this person is not using symbols for the first character or the second character. He can only use lowercase letters, uppercase letters, or numbers. So the entire combination here would be 26 plus 26 plus 10, which will give you 62. Same thing with the second character as well. You can either go with lowercase letters or uppercase letters again. So everything equals 62. And finally, the total number of permutations will be 62 multiplied by 62, which is 3,844 guesses. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's a lot. That's almost 4,000 guesses. But guess what? With automated software, these can be generated within seconds. There are very powerful software that can generate such number of guesses within seconds. So definitely, you should not use two characters for your password. Now, there is a special kind of brute force attack known as the dictionary attack, where every word from a dictionary is used in an attempt to crack that password. And this is one of the reasons why it is always recommended that you do not use words from a dictionary for your password. So what are the general ways how you can fight against brute force attacks? Well, obviously using strong passwords. Make sure your passwords have a minimal length of 8 characters. Make sure they are a combination of uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols as well. Then you can also restrict the number of times a user can attempt to log in successfully. You may have seen this on many websites already, where you're told you have a maximum of 3 attempts to log in successfully, and then you can enforce a timeout for users who have exceeded that specified number of failed login attempts. So when you have all these 3 in place, brute force attacks would be very tough for anyone to crack your passwords using the brute force attack. So that's it for the brute force attack. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next class. So let's take a look at 2 other major forms of attack which are extremely common in the modern day world, and that is phishing and spoofing. So what exactly is phishing? Well, phishing is a form of fraud where the attacker or the cybercriminal pretends to be a reputable entity or person in order to gain access to sensitive information. Now, it is very common with emails. This is the major way how hackers are able to execute phishing attacks, through emails. So what happens here is that the victim, the intended target, will receive an email, and that email will have either a link or an attachment that, if clicked on or downloaded, will install malware on the victim's computer or device. This is the typical way how hackers are able to execute phishing attacks. Now, phishing, the word phishing itself is a homophone for real world phishing, where you have the fisherman or the person doing the fishing who puts some bait around the hook and then puts the hook into the water, hoping that the fish would go for the bait and then in the process get hooked and be caught. Now, it is very popular because it is easier to trick someone to give them access to data or passwords than actually breaking through the computer's defenses. That's why phishing is extremely popular amongst hackers and cyber criminals. And also, you don't even have to be technically sound in order to pull off a phishing attack. Now, it is often built around popular events and holidays. So you can imagine during Christmas, you can receive emails saying, click here to save 50% on all your Christmas purchases, or click here to book 3 weeks free stay at this popular hotel, stuff like that. That's how hackers are able to execute phishing attacks. They usually use them, or they're very popular during popular events and holidays. Now, logos of real companies are often used to fool the victim. So the victim sees a logo from a reputable company like maybe Sony or Amazon. They might instantly be fooled into thinking that, oh, this is a legitimate email. Now, misspelled URLs and subdomains are also used. And you can see two examples here where we have discounts.sony.com. Now, Sony might not actually have a subdomain that says discounts.sony.com, but because the victim here sees Sony in the website's address, they immediately think that, oh, this is just a child website of the major Sony website, so it must be legit. And then, of course, we have the misspelled URLs like Amazon.com. So if the victim isn't very vigilant, they might just see the words Amazon and they might just think, oh, it's Amazon, and then they log in, not knowing that it's actually Amazon and not Amazon.com. So these are two very common tricks employed by phishing attackers. Now, spear phishing, which is a form of phishing, are attacks that are directed at specific targets. So you could be going after maybe the government or a business or a bank. Those would be spear phishing attacks against specific targets. Now, there are attacks that are even more specific, and this would be attacks against senior executives of a company. Such would be called a whaling attack. So when you have a cybercriminal going after the senior executives of a major company, that is what we'll call a whaling attack. Now, email spoofing is simply the forgery of an email header so that the email appears to have originated from someone other than the actual source. So it's extremely similar to phishing, and many people even use the two words interchangeably, spoofing or phishing. So it's basically just an attacker being able to forge an email header so that the victim thinks that the email came from an actual reputable source rather than the original source itself. Now, fighting against phishing, well, there are three major ways of doing this. First would be vigilance. So the more vigilant a person is regarding misspelled URLs and subdomains, well, the better prepared they will be against phishing attacks. Now, use of email filters. There are lots of email filters out there that are able to detect phishing emails and automatically delete them. And there is a website, which is the fraudwatchinternational.com, that keep track of all the latest phishing trends, the latest emails and email headers being used by phishing attackers to fool people. And of course, you can visit the website to learn more about this. So that's it for phishing and spoofing. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next class. Let's talk about bots and botnets, two very popular terms in the world of network and computer security. So the first thing you need to know about bots is that it's actually short for robots. The full word is actually robots. Bots is just a shortened word. And bots are also very commonly referred to as zombies or zombie computers. And the reason why is because in a bot attack, an attacker would gain complete control over the infected computer using a Trojan horse. So basically, the computer can be used to do anything. You have the attacker manipulating how the computer would actually work, and that's why they're referred to as zombies. Now, the infected computer's performance is usually severely degraded. So many times, if an individual notices that his or her system isn't performing quite as effectively as it used to, it could be because the computer has become infected and is actually now part of a botnet. And a botnet, of course, refers to a collection of bots. So when you have multiple bots all under the same control, we refer to that as a botnet. Now, the person in charge of a botnet would usually be a bot master or a bot herder. These are the two terms used to refer to people who are in control of the botnets. Now, a very popular server that you should be aware of is the command and control server. This is actually the server used to issue commands to the bots in a botnet. So you have the attacker who would use the command and control server to pass instructions to the computers that are in the botnet. Now, botnets are very often used to perform DDoS attacks, which we'll talk about in the very next video. But a DDoS attack is a very, very powerful attack and often requires thousands and thousands of computers in order to pull off. So botnets
are usually the very common tool used to perform such an attack. And over here we do have a diagram giving you an illustration of how the botnet actually works. Now you can see the attacker right there, and you can see he has control of all the bots around him. We have the victim right there at the bottom of the screen. And now the attacker is able to issue commands to all the bots via the command and control server, which you can see at the center of the screen. So that's basically how it works. The attacker has complete control over all the bots and can tell these computers to do whatever he or she pleases. Now, prevention, well, updating your antivirus and anti-malware products are one of the best ways to fight against becoming part of a botnet. And of course, not clicking on suspicious links. Remember that one of the key ways how computers become bots is by clicking on Trojan horses. So you have the attacker who will send out multiple emails to different accounts, and then when the individual or the victim clicks on any one of these links in the email that actually has a malware, that computer becomes infected and will become a bot and could become part of a botnet. So not clicking on suspicious links and updating your antivirus and anti-malware products are easily the two most effective ways of fighting against becoming a bot or part of a botnet. So that's it for bots and botnets. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next class. So let's take a look at two other very popular cyber attacks, the DOS and DDoS attacks, otherwise known as the denial of service and the distributed denial of service attacks. So let's take a look at a very common scenario on a daily basis. You have a web server, in this case right now, the web server for bbc.com. And then you have a computer making a request. Maybe the individual wants to get the content for a particular page, maybe the content for the home page. So the web browser for the individual will make the request saying, hey, give me content. Now the web server for bbc.com will respond in kind saying, well, here you go. Here is the content for the home page. Here is the content for this particular article, right? But now imagine a scenario where this particular individual makes over 100,000 requests at the same time. What happens here is the web server for bbc.com is going to become overwhelmed because it has so many requests. It cannot keep track of all these requests. And as a result, the server is going to be put out of action. The server is going to be knocked out. This is what is referred to as a denial of service attack, where an attacker sends so much traffic, so many requests to a server, knocking the server out in the process. Now with a distributed denial of service attack, the objective is the same. The objective is to knock out a server. The main difference here being that with a DDoS, what happens is rather than one single computer making the request, you now have thousands and thousands of computers all over the world making those requests at the same time. So it's a lot bigger in scale and it's a lot more difficult to combat against. DDoS attacks are a lot more severe than the DOS attacks simply because of the scale of such an attack. So let's take a look at some other things you should know about the DOS and DDoS attacks. Now, as I said earlier, with a DOS attack, the attacker will flood servers and networks with useless traffic, all with the objective of knocking out the server. Now, a website becomes inaccessible or there is an enormous amount of spam email. These are usually the two major indications that a DOS attack is on the way. Now, one of the best ways of fighting against a DOS attack is to simply block the IP address of the source. Since it's one single source, it's a lot easier to fight against. All you have to do will be to block the IP address of that particular source. That's the usual way of fighting against DOS attacks. Now, with a distributed denial of service attack, it's a lot harder to combat because traffic comes from thousands of different sources. We're no longer getting traffic from one single source, we're getting traffic from all over the place. Now, it is also more difficult because it is hard to distinguish between legitimate user traffic from attack when spread across so many sources. So this is another reason why DDoS attacks are very difficult to combat against. Now, DDoS attacks are often distributed using botnets. That's usually the major way how hackers are able to make such requests from thousands of computers at the same time because they are in control of all those computers. Now, DOS and DDoS attacks are very common with hacktivists. It's very often hacktivists who would employ this kind of attack, although There are many cyber criminals out there who would actually use DOS attacks and DDoS attacks also, but usually hacktivists tend to be the ones who often use such attacks. Now, combating against DDoS attacks is not easy, but there are three major ways how to do so. Now, over-provision bandwidth is one of the best ways, where a company can buy so much bandwidth that it becomes more difficult for them to inundate the web servers. Now, this wouldn't exactly stop or prevent a DDoS attack. It will simply make it more difficult for the attackers to inundate the web servers because there is now a lot more bandwidth. Now, creating a DDoS playbook, this is what many cybersecurity specialists would often do. They will have a policy in place that would combat or that will provide solutions whenever there is a DDoS attack. So that's one of the best ways of fighting against DDoS attacks, having a playbook or a policy in place directing the company on what to do when there is a DDoS attack. And finally, calling a DDoS specialist. There are companies who specialize fighting against DDoS attacks. We have Akamai and we also have Cloudflare. So that's it for the DOS and DDoS attacks. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next class. Alright, so we just talked about the denial of service attack and the distributed denial of service attacks. And remember I said that in both attacks, useless amounts of traffic are sent to the server, the target server. And I wanted to quickly show you an example of such a useless traffic, and that would be the ping traffic. Now, you may already know what a ping is, but if you don't, well, a ping is simply a network command. It's used to determine whether or not a particular server is working, if it's online. So basically what you would do is, as an example, if you are using Windows or if you're on your Mac, go to the command prompt. So for Windows, it's going to be the Windows key and R. I'm going to type in CMD. And this is going to bring me to the command prompt, as you can see right now. So typically, if I wanted to find out if CNN.com was working, okay, I could simply come in here and say ping www.cnn.com. Press enter. Now you can see that we have reply. So this means that indeed CNN.com is online. The website is working. Sometimes people use the ping to test whether or not they have internet connectivity problems. Sometimes you may not be able to reach a certain website, and sometimes it may not be the website that has the problem, but there might be something wrong with your own connectivity. So one of the ways how network administrators test is using the ping command. They will try to ping the website's address and then see if there's a reply. Then they know that the problem is internal and not with the actual website itself. So right now you've seen I sent out a ping. So what happened right here was that the web server for CNN had to respond saying, yes, I'm alive, I'm online, I'm replying back to you. So in a denial of service attack and the distributed denial of service attacks, such commands like the ping, they will be in the hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. So this is the example of the kinds of useless traffic that can be sent to a web server. In my case right now, this wasn't useless per se. I wanted to genuinely find out whether or not CNN was online. But if I decide to send out this same ping request millions of times at once, then you know I'm being malicious, and this is exactly how denial of service attacks and distributed denial of service attacks are carried out. This is one of the few ways how they are carried out. They send out tons and tons of ping requests. So that's it for the ping. Hopefully you've learned something new today. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next class. And actually, before I go, let me just show you, if you are interested in learning more, you can come down here to Wikipedia. There is a very good article about the ping, the networking utility, which is ping. And it is a little bit technical, so I really don't know how far you want to go, but you can learn some pretty cool stuff from Wikipedia about ping. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next class. So let's talk about another major attack, which is the man-in-the-middle attack. Now, what happens here is, imagine a scenario where we have two computers interacting with one another. You have them exchanging data and information. Everything is going smoothly. until we now have a hacker who is able to position themselves virtually in between both computers, and they are able to intercept the messages being transmitted from computer 1 to computer 2 and vice versa. This is the man-in-the-middle attack. So a hacker virtually is able to place himself or herself in between two computers who are communicating with one another, and is able to steal or even modify the data being passed in between such computers. So let me give you a real-world example of a man-in-the-middle attack, and to do this, I am going to take you back to the good old days before the invention of the internet and emails. So let's imagine we have a guy named Jim who writes a letter saying, "I love you" to Jessica. Ooh, now the postman intercepts the letter. The postman, in this case, being the hacker, he then edits the letter to "I hate you." Jessica then receives the letter, and then finally, poor Jim wonders why Jessica never called him again. So this is a real-world analogy, a real-life scenario of a man-in-the-middle attack, where you have someone who is able to intercept messages between two or more people. So there are some key points to know about the man-in-the-middle attack, and that is that it can only succeed when the attacker can impersonate both sides. So it's not just a matter of being able to position themselves in between two computers virtually. They also need to be able to fool both computers into thinking that they are the actual legitimate source or the intended target of the message. And an example here would be the attacker being able to impersonate the IP addresses of all the computers involved. Now, it is very common with unsecure wireless connections. A man-in-the-middle attack is very difficult to pull off in a wired network, but where you have a wireless connection that is now unsecure, a man-in-the-middle attack is very, very common. And there are three major types of MITMAs, man-in-the-middle attacks. The very first one is the email hijacking, where an attacker is able to gain access to email accounts. So imagine a hacker being able to log into someone's email. They can read all the emails being sent to that particular individual, and then they can even decide to send emails to other people using the victim's email address. So that is email hijacking. We also have the Wi-Fi eavesdropping, which is kind of like what we just talked about in the presentation, where an attacker is able to hack into an unsecure Wi-Fi connection and then able to intercept the messages between computers. And then, of course, we have the session hijacking, where an attacker is able to hijack the connection between a computer and a website. Now, specifically, not just two computers, but a computer and a website. Now, in the real world, MITMAs have been very, very lucrative for some hackers. And an example here would be in 2015, where cybercriminals in Belgium stole over $6 million. And they did this by being able to gain access to the corporate accounts of several companies, the email accounts of several companies. So they were able to impersonate the companies, send out emails to clients and customers who then send them money, thinking that the emails came from the real companies, not knowing that they came from the hackers. So that's it for the MITMAs, the man-in-the-middle attack. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next class. Let's take a look at one more type of attack, and this is the SQL injection. Very, very, very popular attack with cyber criminals and hackers. But first of all, what exactly is SQL? Well, SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it is the language used for database management and data manipulation. All right. So SQL can be used to query, to update data, modify data, or even insert data into a database. That's primarily what SQL is used for. Now, in an SQL injection attack, the attacker or the hacker will execute malicious SQL commands in order to corrupt a database. That's the primary objective behind an SQL injection attack. Now, such an attack can provide the attacker with unauthorized access to very valuable information such as usernames, passwords. So in such a scenario where the attacker has gained control, he could decide to delete very sensitive information from a database. He could decide to add his own data to the database, or simply modify the data that already exists in that database. That's primarily what an SQL injection attack is. And it's also one of the oldest forms of attacks. Very, very old, but still very, very popular. And it's also very powerful because such an attack has been used in attacks against Sony, LinkedIn, Yahoo, Microsoft, and even the CIA. So this is a very, very powerful form of attack. Now, one particular software you need to be aware of is the Havij software. This was developed in Iran by cybersecurity professionals, and it is a tool used by penetration testers to find and exploit SQL vulnerabilities. So very often, whenever a penetration tester has been hired by a company to test how strong or how weak their database is, usually Havij would be the software used for such a process. The problem here, though, is that Havij is a double-edged sword. Just as you have the good guys, the pen testers in this case, testing out how vulnerable a database is with the tool, hackers also use Havij to attack databases. So basically, it's a very powerful tool, can be used for either good or for bad purposes. So very, very popular software with SQL injections, Havij. Now, a very similar attack to the SQL injection attack is the cross-site scripting attack, otherwise known as the XSS attack. Now, in such an attack, the attacker will execute malicious scripts of code into a website or web application. So it's similar to an SQL injection attack in that the attacker uses malicious code. The difference, though, is the target. In an SQL injection attack, you have the attacker going up against a database. In an XSS attack, you have the attacker attacking a website now or a web application. Now, such an attack isn't aimed at a victim directly, but at the website that the victim would actually visit. And then when they visit that website or they use that web application, the victim's browser becomes infected as a result. So that's primarily the cross-site scripting attack, an attack against a web application or a website using malicious scripts of code. So combating SQL attacks, well, there are three major ways how this can be done. One will be to limit database privileges, which means that you basically limit the power or the amount of things people can do from the database. So even if a hacker or an attacker gains control of a database, the amount of damage that they can perform right there would be limited. Next would be comprehensive data sanitization, which means that databases need to be configured in such a way that only the right kind of characters are accepted in certain fields. So as an example, if you had a field in your database which was reserved for phone numbers, you would expect only numbers or figures to appear in such fields. You're not going to expect to have special characters or letters in such a field. So databases need to be configured in such a way that their fields would only accept the characters that they are meant to accept. And finally, applying software patches. Very, very important. This has been said so many times before. Updates, applying software patches, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, lots of people take these things for granted. But when you apply your software patches, you have a much better chance of fighting against SQL and even XSS attacks. So that's it for the SQL injection attack. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next class.
Alright, so welcome to this new section where we're going to be talking about malware and the different kinds of malware that we have. Now, I'm sure you've heard of terms like viruses, worms, trojans, spyware, adware. Well, all these terms are collectively referred to as malware. Malware actually stands for malicious software. So any kind of software that is aimed at destroying files or corrupting a system, that's what we generally refer to as a malware. And as I said earlier, viruses and trojans and worms and all the others are different types of malware. So in this section, we're going to be analyzing each one of these different types of malware, how they operate, and also how they can be defeated. So I hope you have a lot of fun, and I will see you at the end of the section. Bye.
So let's talk about the two major forms of malware, which are the viruses and worms. Very similar in what they do, but are actually different in the way they operate. So what exactly are viruses and worms? Well, they're basically malicious code that is developed to change the way a computer or a network operates. Always keep it at the back of your mind that viruses and worms attack network systems also, not just computers, but also network systems as well. Now, there is a major difference between viruses and worms, and that is the fact that while a virus would require an active host or an already infected system in order to run successfully, a worm, on the other hand, is self-replicating and self-propagating. Now, what this means that a worm or worms can spread themselves without any help. They have the ability to reproduce on their own and spread themselves to other networks and computers without any help. Viruses, on the other hand, require an active host or an already infected system in order for them to run successfully. That is the major difference between the two. So you could say that worms are more advanced than viruses. Now let's talk about viruses in general. Well, there are 4 basic stages in which a virus goes from being developed to actually causing harm on a computer system. And the very first stage right here is a virus will typically attach itself to an executable file or a Word document. That's typically how they attach themselves. And then they will spread via email attachments, infected websites, and flash drives. These are typically the 3 major ways how viruses are able to spread themselves. And then once they get onto a computer system or a network, many viruses can remain dormant until the infected file or system is activated. So a virus could be written to only act when something has actually happened on a system. Say, for example, a virus could be written to become active only when a user visits a particular website. That's how developed viruses can be. And then once they're activated, the virus goes on to cause destruction. That's basically how viruses operate. With worms, even though they are more advanced, the way they operate is actually very, very easy. They first of all spread themselves or enter systems via network connections or downloaded files. These are basically the 2 ways how worms are able to enter systems. And then once they do so, they can make copies of themselves and then spread again via a network or internet connection. Kind of like Agent Smith from the movie Matrix. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and see Matrix. It's a wonderful movie. So going back to viruses again, one thing you need to keep in mind is that viruses can vary widely in their objectives. Worms, 99% of the time, worms are destructive, but viruses can vary widely in the way they operate. For example, you could have some viruses that are purely destructive. Their intent, their objective is to destroy files. That's all they're there to do. But you could also have some viruses that want to slow down system performance. So they're not really destroying files, but they are there just to slow down the way a computer system operates. And believe it or not, there are actually some viruses that are non-destructive. That is, they are latent viruses. They're just there. They're not really doing anything. They're not causing any harm. They are just there. Now, the 3 best ways how you can fight against viruses and worms would be the use of antivirus and anti-malware products. These are some of the 2 best ways how you can fight against viruses and worms. But you could also restrict the use of flash drives. Remember that viruses and worms can spread rapidly with the use of a flash drive. And then finally, scanning email attachments. Still one of the most popular ways how worms in particular are able to spread via email attachments. So whenever you see an email attachment, always be sure that it is from a trusted source, or make sure that you scan it before you download it to your system. So with these 3 methods, you can highly restrict the effectiveness of viruses and worms on any computer system or network system.
Thank you so much for signing up for the course. And before we get things rolling, I just wanted to give you a few tips on how best to take this course. So this course is meant to be an introduction into the world of cybersecurity and information security. We're not really going to be touching on anything technical. It is meant to be a non-technical course. So if you are interested in becoming a cybersecurity professional or an information security professional, this course is meant to be a stepping stone to greater things, which means that while at the end of this course you will have gained well-rounded knowledge, it is still important that you do further reading. If you intend on going to the technical aspects of information security or cybersecurity, then there are obviously other courses that you would need to take. However, if you just wanted to have a better understanding about security concepts and how they're actually applied, then this course would be enough for you, although you can always improve on your knowledge by doing further reading outside the scope of this course. Now, you're going to have quizzes at the end of some of these sections. Please do take these quizzes. They are meant to test your knowledge, so please take them, don't just ignore them. There might be a few instances where I also attach links to articles that I'll suggest that you read. If you are interested, please do read these articles. They're meant to help you and improve on your knowledge as well. So once again, if you have any questions about the course, or if you have any questions about any of the topics, or if you have any suggestions on how to improve the course, I am always open to your suggestions and your ideas. So please feel free to reach out to me. You can either send me a private message or shoot me an email. So thank you so much once again for enrolling in the course, and let's get started. All right, so I'm going to play you a clip from a movie titled Troy. I want you to sit back, relax, enjoy the clip. It's going to be about 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and I'll see you at the end of the clip. Enjoy.
What is this? An offering to Poseidon. The Greeks are praying for a safe return home.
I hope the sea god spits in their offering. Lets them all drown at the bottom of the sea.
This is a gift. We should take it to the temple of Poseidon.
I think we should burn it.
Burn it, my prince. It's a gift to the gods.
Father, burn it.
All right, so welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the clip. If you've seen the movie before, then you know what that scene is all about. If you haven't seen the movie before or you don't know the story, well, here's what happened. Now, the people you saw at the beach looking at the huge wooden horse, those people were Trojans. They came from a city called Troy. Now, the people inside of that wooden horse that eventually came out, those were the Greeks. The Greeks were trying to conquer Troy. So they had been waging war, but they were unable to defeat the Trojans. So here's what the Greeks did. They knew very well that the Trojans were very superstitious people. They believed in gods and gifts and things like that. So they built this wooden horse and then they hid a few of them inside, and then they left it at the beach of Troy. So when the Trojans with their king came and saw the wooden horse, they thought that, you know what, this must be a gift from the gods. Let's take it into our city and worship it. So they dragged the horse into the city, not knowing that Greek soldiers were inside. So they were very happy. Yay, the gods have given us this huge gift. And then at night, when all of them were sleeping, the Greeks inside of the wooden horse came out. They then went to the main gates, opened the gates so that the rest of the Greek soldiers could come in. And if you've seen the movie, then you know that at the end of the movie, well, the Greeks are able to defeat the Trojans. Now, the reason why this clip was so important is because it describes accurately how Trojans actually work in the world of IT security. And in fact, the term Trojan came from this story about the Greeks fighting against the Trojans. That is where the word Trojan came from, the Trojan malware. So Trojans appear to be legitimate, they appear to be useful software, but in fact, they're actually malicious code looking to harm your computer system or a computer network.
Alright, and so Trojans, what exactly are they? Well, a Trojan is a very powerful malware, often disguised as legitimate software. Now, this makes them very sophisticated because they could be anything. It could be a game, a video, a song, or even an application. Now, the one major difference between a Trojan from a virus or worm is that while viruses and worms can self-replicate, a Trojan cannot self-replicate, which is really a blessing. Imagine if Trojans were able to self-replicate. This would make them incredibly destructive. Now, in terms of how destructive Trojans can be, well, there are 4 major types of Trojans that you should be aware of. And the very first one would be the backdoor Trojan. Now, this allows a hacker unauthorized access to a system in order to control it. So basically, a backdoor allows a hacker to penetrate into a computer and then take control of that computer system. We also have the info stealer Trojan. Now, this steals data from infected computers. It could be credit card information, passwords, addresses, and other things like that. And then there's a Trojan downloader. These are used to download and install new versions of malware onto a system. So a Trojan can be programmed to infect a system and then go on to download additional viruses and worms to even make things more destructive for that particular computer system or network. And finally, we also have the Trojan DDoS, which is able to conduct denial of service attacks against websites. There are so many other different kinds of Trojans out there, but these are the 4 major ones that you should know of. Now, in terms of fighting against Trojans, well, the best way would be to use anti-malware products. This is basically one of the best ways how you can fight against Trojans. And of course, you can also run updates whenever they are available. And finally, only download files from trusted websites. Remember that Trojans and as well as viruses and worms often are able to infect systems and networks because people go on to download files from unscrupulous websites. So that's it for Trojans. Thank you for watching, and of course I will see you in the next class. So let's talk about adware and spyware, and I'm pretty sure you must have heard of these 2 terms before. So what exactly are they? Well, I'm pretty sure you must have seen advertisements like this before on the internet. Some would say, hey, you're the proud winner of a new car, or congratulations, you've won $10,000, or you might find some other ads that will promise you that if you take a certain pill, you might last longer in bed or something like that. All these are what we refer to as adware. So what exactly is adware? Well, adware would be a program that displays unwanted banner advertisements. That's all adware basically is. Now, they're very often bundled within software that is installed. So whenever you go on the internet and you install a free software or a free app, there is the chance that you might also be installing an adware as well. Now, the reason why we have the adware included is because the developer or whoever wrote that program or software would like to recover some of the costs that it took him or her or them to develop the product in the first place. So basically, it's a way for developers to make some money out of offering a product for free. So you get to use the product for free, but then you also have the adware installed on your computer system as well. That's basically why adware is included within our free software applications. Now, you should also know though that some certain adware can be more malicious in that they can hijack your browser, start or search pages. You may have experienced this before where you've set your home page to be the Google search engine, and then when you open your browser, it takes you to a different home page. That is an adware that is working. But now there are even more sinister adware out there that can track web usage, and these are what we refer to as spyware. So you could say spyware are a form of adware that track web usage. So spyware, you can see from the image right now that we have a laptop and we have two eyes bulging out looking at the main computer screen and the keyboard as well. That's exactly what spyware is. They spy on you. And as I said earlier, they can monitor computer and internet use. And how they do this well, an example would be keyloggers. Keyloggers can record keystrokes so that every time anyone types on a keyboard, the keylogger will record every single keystroke that is made, and they can also take screenshots of what the person is viewing on their screen. Now, this data can then be sent back to hackers who can then get credit card information, passwords, things like that, or the data can also be sent to advertising agencies so that they know what your interests are and they will begin to serve you advertisements. That's what spyware can do. So basically, the two best ways how you can fight against ad and spyware would be to think twice about using free software. Now, of course, there are software out there that is completely free, no strings attached. However, there are many free software out there that also require that you have the adware installed as well. So think twice about installing free software. It's very often recommended that if you can afford to go for the premium version of a software, you go ahead and buy the premium version. And of course, you can always use spyware scanners as well. There are so many of them out there which you can always use to scan your computer system, make sure that there ain't any ad or spyware malware running on your computer system. Let's talk about one of the absolute worst forms of malware, and I'm talking about ransomware. Now, you may have seen an image like this before where a computer gets locked out and then there's a message saying you have to pay a certain amount of money in order to unlock the computer. This is a classic example of ransomware. Basically, a computer system is infected and prevented from being used by the owner until the owner pays a certain amount of money. So it's basically hijacking a computer system or kidnapping a computer system, so to say. Now, the general idea behind ransomware is that the victim did something bad. Maybe they visited a pornographic website or they did something wrong somewhere, and so they now have to pay for their cyber crimes. That's the general idea behind ransomware. Now, ransomware can prevent you from using your PC and even encrypt files, and this makes it really, really bad because at least with viruses or worms or trojans, even though your system is infected, you can still use it. With ransomware, on the other hand, your system can be completely locked out. You would not even be able to go to your home page or your desktop or even use any of the applications that you have, making it extremely difficult to fight against ransomware. Now, it can spread to other PCs as well and turn them to botnets or bots, which we'll talk about a bit later. Now, one of the horrible things about ransomware is that it doesn't discriminate. It targets anyone and everyone. They don't care whether you are a hospital, a private business, an individual, a school. As long as the cyber criminals behind ransomware can make money from you, they will attack you and they will try to make money from you. They don't care. Also, payments are very often requested in bitcoins or cryptocurrency because they cannot be tracked by the police or by the authorities. Now, the very first ransomware emerged back in the year of 1989, and it was called the AIDS Trojan. Now, what's interesting here is that the AIDS Trojan spread through the use of floppy drives, and those who were affected had to send money to a bank in Panama. It was about $180 in order for them to get the code that would allow them to decrypt the files and continue using their system. How time has changed since then. Now, numerous variants of ransomware exist and more are produced very quickly, making it even more difficult for the cyber security experts to keep track of all the different forms and variants of malware, or ransomware rather, that we have out there. Now, it infects computers mostly through email links and downloads. Again, email links are one of the primary ways how malware in general spreads to computers and networks. So now let's talk about some of the worst forms of ransomware that we've had so far. And the very first one is the WannaCry ransomware. This emerged in May 2017, very, very recent, and it infected over 200,000 computers in 150 different countries, and it used a vulnerability in the Windows operating system to exploit computers and attack them. We also have the torrent locker that came out in early 2014. Now, this encrypted files and relied on spam emails to distribute itself. Now, it also used something called geographical targeting, which means that it only attacked people from a specific region of the world. And in this case, it was mostly in the United States and Canada. Now, the reason why ransomware might use geographical targeting is because in the lockout screen, where the message is written in a certain language, they would rather have people who actually understand that language be the ones to be affected by the ransomware rather than people from a different part of the world who may not speak that language. That's why geographical targeting is used sometimes. Then we also have Locky, which emerged in February 2016. And get this, Locky extorted over $17,000 from a hospital in Hollywood. Remember when I said that ransomware targets anyone and everyone? They got over $17,000 from a hospital in Hollywood, and since then, it has continued to spread across the world. And finally, we have the CTB locker that emerged in early 2014. Now, this had multilingual capabilities, which means that the lockout screen message could be changed to Chinese, it could be changed to Finnish, it could be changed to Portuguese, Spanish, German, and it was one of the very first ransomware to be sold as a service in underground forums. The CTB locker emerging in early 2014. Now you can take a look at this infographic, the damage caused by ransomware. Over 97% of phishing emails deliver ransomware. Again, emails are one of the key ways how ransomware spreads to computers. Over 70% of infected businesses ended up paying the ransom. So you can imagine why cyber criminals continue to use ransomware as a way of making money, because victims are forced to pay the money. Now, only 42% of the ransomware victims were able to recover their data even after making payment. So making payment doesn't always work. Now, the amount of money that was often charged was between $200 and $10,000, depending on who the victim was. Now, more than 50% of these companies paid between $10,000 and $40,000. And of course, 1 in 4 paying users never recovered their data. So you can imagine just how bad and horrible ransomware is. So let's talk about the 5 key ways how one can fight against ransomware. 1, use data backups. If you have a backup of all your data, you would not care as much if the current data that you have was infected since you already have a backup. Secondly, turn off external applications like Dropbox, Google Drive, and only turn them on when you need to use them. Run updates, including browser add-ons. So if you're having extensions on your browser or add-ons, make sure they are well updated. If they're outdated, you either update them or remove them entirely. And of course, never open spam emails or click on suspicious links. Never ever do that. And finally, as always, use an antivirus. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next class. So we have already talked about all the major types of malware out there. We've talked about viruses, worms, trojans, spyware, ransomware, and a few others. So now let's round up this discussion on malware by talking about a few other ones. And the very first one we'll talk about would be rootkits. Now, these are very similar to a burglar hiding in the attic of a house. And the idea here is that rootkits would hide and then strike when the opportunity arises. Now, these are the hardest malware of all to detect and remove. And one of the key features of rootkits is that they allow other malware to sort of hide in plain sight by disguising them as real essential files. So you can see just how sophisticated rootkits can be. They can make the most malicious of viruses out there look like an essential file, and then it will fool the antivirus into thinking that such files are actually legitimate. Now, they are activated even before the operating system boots up. So if you're using Windows as an example, even before your computer has finished booting, the rootkit is already working once that system is infected. So you can see why it is so hard to get rid of them. Now, the recommended solution, once you've discovered that you've been infected with the rootkit, is to simply wipe out the hard drive. There is no software available out there that can guarantee you 100% that the rootkit has been removed. The safest way would be to completely wipe out the hard drive, or in fact, use a brand new hard drive and just discard the hard drive that's been infected by the rootkit. So let's talk about a browser hijacker, which is not as malicious as the other malware we've talked about. In fact, this is very similar to an adware. They basically hijack the victim's browser. And what this means is that they can redirect victims to specific pages. A classic example is when you set your homepage to be a particular website, and then when you click on your browser and you open it expecting to see that website, you are redirected to a different website. Now, the intention behind browser hijackers is to make money by feeding ads to the victim. Browser hijackers really aren't in there to steal information or destroy files. All they want to do is to redirect the victim to a website where they can provide ads to the victim. Now, most are actually developed by advertisers looking to track usage habits. So again,